We had a very good discussion this morning, again, after having yesterday agreed on this huge energy package. There's a lot of work now ahead of us what the energy is concerned, but the roadmap is very clear, and it was good to have this unanimity, this broad support for the roadmap that we have put forward. Today, the focus was indeed on the two topics, Ukraine and China. And here, looking at Ukraine, let me first of all focus on the financing of Ukraine. As you know, we had agreed to have 9 billion of macrofinancial assistance to Ukraine, which will be partially dispersed till the end of the year. Overall, so far, the European Union, the European level have supported Ukraine since the beginning of the year with by now 19 billion euros. But the focus was in the discussion more now on the year to come. It is very important for Ukraine to have a predictable and stable flow of income. And therefore, we assume, and Ukraine is telling us that they need approximately 3 to 4 billion euros per month to have enough resources for the basics. And these 3 to 4 billion euros should be financed by the European Union, by our American friends, and by the financial institutions. Therefore, the discussion was about round about 1.5 billion per month for Ukraine, financed by the European Union. So this would give overall a figure of 18 billion for the next year, an amount where then Ukraine can count on and where there's a stable and reliable, predictable flow of income. We have tasked the finance ministers to develop the appropriate mechanism, but it was important also to give this signal to Ukraine that we very well know how important this reliable flow of income is. Of course, there are other topics on the agenda. Having seen in the last days the atrocious and deliberate attacks of Russia against civilian infrastructure, Ukraine has other needs that have to be addressed. For example, the mobilization of humanitarian aid to help the most vulnerable in Ukraine to get through this winter. In particular, the more than 11 million internally displaced people by now who need support, who need access to water, electricity, heating, who need shelter. We have announced this week that we will provide a further 175 million euros for food, for shelter, for health support, and for education. And we will provide emergency shelters in the Rivne, Bucha, and Kharkiv regions. Of course, we are in very close contact now with the Ukrainian authorities to look at how we can restore as best and as much as possible electricity, water supply, and other essential services like, for example, heating. For that purpose, Commissioner Lenarčič was on site this week to assess the situation, to activate the civil protection mechanism, and to look at how best and quickly we can support Ukraine to deal with these vicious and atrocious attacks on the civilian infrastructure. This is the immediate support, but of course there is also the mid- and long-term support for reconstruction. And indeed, next week we will have, in the context of the German G7 presidency, co-hosted by the Chancellor and me, a conference on the reconstruction of Ukraine. This is a conference that looks at the how should we address the reconstruction. It is a huge task. It is an international conference. The best experts worldwide will join and discuss how to best approach technically, but also financially this reconstruction process together, not only with the European Union, but also with our global partners. And of course, the reconstruction process and the massive investments that are necessary should be aligned with the needs for reform in order to really pave already the path to EU membership. Ukraine, as you know, is a candidate country, so everything should be focused on this common journey that we will undertake together. The second topic was indeed China. And yes, the discussion showed that we're witnessing quite an acceleration of trends and tensions. It was very clear from the Congress that we've seen that President Xi is continuing to reinforcing the very assertive and self-reliant course China has taken. And clearly, China is continuing a mission to establish its dominance in East Asia and its influence globally. And at the same time, we have been witnessing, you will recall that in February, the so-called Agreement on No Limits Partnership between Russia and China right before the invasion in Ukraine. So these developments will affect the EU-China relationship. The Chinese system is fundamentally different from ours, and we are aware of the nature of the rivalry. And against this backdrop, we had a very good strategic discussion on our relationship with China. Obviously, we have to be very vigilant when it comes to dependencies. And we've learned our lesson, what the overdependency on fossil fuels from Russia is concerned, and how tough but necessary it is to get rid of this dependency. In the case of China, it is the risk of dependency on technologies and raw materials. And therefore, the priorities here are to reinforce our own capacities and, of course, also to diversify the supply of raw materials towards reliable, trustworthy suppliers. In this context, the CHIPS Act concerning semiconductors, so technologies, and the Critical Raw Materials Act are the major initiatives that we have put on the table. They are basically the strategic response to our dependencies. But so are also the free trade agreements and raw material partnerships that we are working on with other countries, in other words, with reliable partners. The recent foreign direct investment screening is also a strong tool that has been given to us. So with our new instruments, like the International Procurement Instrument and the Regulation on Foreign Subsidies, we will have a new foundation how to approach China. Those two, the International Procurement Instrument and the foreign subsidies, these regulations will enter into force in spring next year. This shows there is a broad approach on the judicial side towards the risks that we see in the relationship with China, also the difficulties to achieve a level playing field, and the steps forward we have taken to solve here the imbalances and to re-level the playing field. I hope we can soon add another layer to that. That will be our anti-coercion instrument. A broad discussion on all these different topics, an excellent discussion and a very good council. And with that, Barend, I give the floor back to you.